Summer. Throughout history, a lot of famous people have made a lot of really stupid moves. Some of them have resulted in them ruining their lives, losing great battles, and even giving up the chance to earn incredible amounts of money or fame. I now know what that feels like. For the last few days, I'd been in some kind of S-fueled fever. I was running my life. It had taken Ted practically pushing me out of his apartment to sober me up and make me wonder just what the F was wrong with me. Ted loved me. I knew that from the soles of my feet to the top of my nearly 6-foot-tall frame. For the past 3 years, he'd worshipped me. I was insane. My whole goddamned life my mom had been promising me that one day I would meet a man who would love me the way I should be and deserve to be loved. It had taken 19 years for me to meet him, and now at 23, I was giving him up for S with a man who was not only more than twice my age, but had 4 other women. Another thing about the situation was that Carlo didn't care half as much about me as Ted did. Most guys found me pretty. But I was the kind of pretty that they admired from afar. I'm an oddity. I'm too tall for the average guy. Most guys need a woman who is shorter than they are. That means that except for basketball players and other tall guys, most guys lack the confidence to date me. Who really wants to walk around with a woman who's taller than them? Ted didn't care. He always talked about how beautiful I am. Then there's the fact that my body is more like a fashion model's than the average girl's. I have no chest to speak of and my hips are boyish. Sure, when I'm 40 and still slim, most of my Kavya classmates will be jealous of me, but that's 17 years from now. Ted loves me now. My parents were hippies back when they were younger. And they weren't even part of the original hippie movement. They were in the commune during the late 70s and early 80s, which was only about 30 years ago. They'd given up on the idea of living with a group of people and sharing everything, but they still passed on a lot of their views to me. I've always been kind of experimental when it came to things. To be truthful, most of the men I'd been with couldn't keep up with me when it came to it. Ted was no exception. But 3 things made Ted different from every other guy. The first was that thing with him, though we'd long since passed the point where it was fresh and exciting, was still good. What made it good was the fact that Ted loved me so much that it showed in the way he touched me and the way he looked into my eyes and projected that love to me. The second thing was his brain. Ted was always using that engineering mind of his to come up with different things to try, or different positions, or just different angles for us to try during it. His inventiveness kept things from getting stale. The last thing was his enthusiasm. It was like thing with me meant everything to Ted. He would do whatever it took to try to get me off, and he usually succeeded. Not very many men could get me off alone, but Ted almost always did. It sometimes seemed like it was more important to him that I had an han he did. And the man loved me. It was simply his favorite thing to do. He made things too easy. Ted, honey, what do you want for your birthday? I'd ask. He didn't even have to answer. The look on his face was enough. I was the luckiest girl in the world to have a man. I had to sometimes hold out on him, to make sure that he didn't get tired of me. If I let him, he'd have probably F'd me every night until he got sick of me. Then along came Carlo. I don't know what happened. He isn't as cute as Ted, but there was something about him. I think that at first it was curiosity. I wondered what it was about him that had 4 attractive young women hanging on his every word. I spoke to one of his girls while in the bathroom and she told me that it was thing that drew them in. I almost laughed in her face, but my curiosity was piqued. So one night when Ted had to study, I went over to their large house. I had no intention of cheating on Ted. Okay, maybe I did. But I didn't intend for things to turn out the way they did. I thought it would just be a one-time thing. We all gathered around and smoked some, and the next thing I knew I was surrounded by bodies and Carlo was F me. He didn't do anything unusual. In fact, he didn't do anything that Ted couldn't and hadn't done. But for some reason I had it after it. After the first few times I started to crave his attention. It got to the point where I was irritable when I wasn't around him. I started to get angry when I thought about the other 4 girls getting to F him all the time and me only getting to whenever I could get away from Ted. I had to make a decision. There were at least 12 people who lived in the house. It was a small commune, but a good one. They all shared everything. They all took turns doing the work and the chores around the place. Where my life seemed like a constant, pointless struggle, theirs seemed like heaven. I made the decision to join them. I knew that my parents would be angry and disappointed, and I knew that it would hurt Ted more than anyone else, but it was the best decision for me. But even as Ted closed that door on me after our talk, something told me to knock on that door and beg his forgiveness. Something told me that I had and was making the biggest mistake of my life. But that furry monster between my long thin legs wouldn't take no for an answer. After I left Ted, I got my 2 best friends to buy me some time. I told them that if I wasn't back in a month, that they could consider me gone for good. Beth made me realize that I needed to make my mind up in a hurry. So if you're not back in 30 days, you'll be fine with me going after him? She asked. I guess so, I said in shock. I knew that some of the girls on campus would go after my boyfriend, but I hadn't considered that my best friends might. My first few nights in the commune were a haze of and partying. It didn't seem like we ever did any kind of work. I did hear Carlo talk about money from time to time and it seemed like he made a lot of it. I asked him a few times if he needed me to do some kind of work to help out, but he just laughed. All of the other girls worked. It seemed as if they all worked at night though. They seemed to have very liberal hours. It seemed as if they worked alternating evenings. I first realized that things might not be what I thought about a week after I'd gotten there. I noticed that the thing the night before simply hadn't been good. In fact, it had been boring. I'd found myself thinking about Ted. The next morning was even worse. A guy who seemed familiar came into my room and started taking his clothes off. "What the F do you think you're doing?" I asked. "Oh crap," he said. "The thing wore off, didn't it?" "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You just need to relax, baby," he said. "Let's just fire up one of those special and then we can party the way we always do." "Are you out of your mind?" I screamed. "Get away from me. There's no way I'd ever have it with you. You're revolting. Why is it that all of you old, bald-headed guys think you're some kind of Casanova because you have a little bit of money? You need to get out of my room before I call Carlo and tell him what you tried to do." Apparently, I'd hurt his pride though. He started putting his clothes on. "F you," he spat. "You're nothing special. Out of all of Carlo's you're probably the ugliest one anyway. The only thing special about you is those out-of-this-world BJ and the way you wrap those crazy long thin legs. But have it your way, B. As of this moment, you're cut off." "Cut off from what?" I asked. "What the F do you think I do around here?" he asked. "Carlo gets all of the things from me. Let's see how much you enjoy what you've been doing when you're sober." "Wait," I said. "Please, wait a minute. Tell me what you're talking about. You mean that Carlo D me?" "Duh," he spat. "Think about it. Why else would a woman as young as you are be so hot for a 40-year-old pimp? Every time you get high enough, you F every guy he sends into your room. You've been on my special blend. Once you get high enough, you usually with anything cylindrical, you ain't picky." I realized then, the mistake that I'd made. The whole thing had been a setup. It had never been the thing. I had ruined my life because of an asshole slipping something. On one hand I was pissed. On the other I was happy. Now that I understood what was going on, I could get my life back. I got off of the bed and went to my closet. I started putting my clothes on and the man finished dressing himself and left the room. Just as I started throwing my clothes into a suitcase, Carlo came into my room. I looked at him then and laughed. He was a short, hairy little man. I wondered when he became anything more. I remembered then that my first impression of him had been curiosity. It had been after the thing that I'd begun to see him as anything different. "Are you upset, Summer?" he asked. "You'd me, asshole, I'm going home." "But you are home," he said. "What kind of home is there where they get you so that you black out and then let disgusting old men do it with you?" I asked. "This one," he laughed. "You haven't had a problem with it until now. You're just upset because you found out about it too soon. All of the girls go through what you're going through. You'll be okay. You just need to realize your place in the grand scheme of things." "I'm going straight to the police," I said. "For what?" he asked. "All you'll do is make yourself look like the W that you've become. I have hours of video of you begging my customers to F you. Would you like to see one? I've been selling your videos as well. You're quite the moneymaker. As soon as they get a blood sample, they'll realize that I was D," I screamed. "You'll never see daylight again." "Oh well, guess we're going for the lump sum payout," he said. "What?" I asked. He wasn't making any sense. "It's like the lottery, dummy," he said. "When you win a prize you have to decide whether you want the whole 5 million or the yearly payouts. If you take the lump sum, you get it all at once but they cut it in half. If you take the payments you get more money but you get it a little at a time. I wanted the yearly payments with you because like I said, you're a good little moneymaker. Plus I like that young of yours myself, but I guess that's over." "Damn straight, asshole," I said. "I'm leaving." I grabbed my suitcase and started walking. I never felt any sense of malice from Carlo. He was never threatening or angry. As I passed by him he just said, "Good night, Summer." "Don't you mean goodbye?" I asked sharply. "Whatever," he said. Then in a movement so fast it almost didn't register, he punched me in the chin. At first I didn't feel anything, then I was out. When I woke up, I had no idea where I was, how long I'd been out or what had happened to me in the interim. I did remember though that I'd intended to go home. I got off of the bed that I was lying on and found out that I was chained to it. I tried to yank the chain free and the noise I made brought a woman. She was a light tan color and spoke Spanish. I didn't understand a word she was saying. My Spanish was limited to the menu at Taco Bell, so we had a big communication problem. but I got the gist of her words. She was trying to warn me against making noise. By the time I realized what she was trying to convey, it was too late. A big man walked into the room and looked me over. He spoke to me in Spanish too. When it became clear to him that I didn't understand him, he left the room and came back with another man. This one was younger, smaller, and far less wholesome looking. "What?" he asked. "I want to go home," I said. "Why am I here?" "That's simple," he said. "You're AW. You're here to do it with anybody who comes into this room. They pay me. That makes me and my fat wife happy. I feed you. You stay healthy enough to F the next batch of guys I send in here. It's the circle of life. Haven't you seen The Lion King? I won't do it. Where's Carlo?" I screamed. "Carlo is back in America," he said. "You got on his nerves, so he sold you to me. Someday, if I make enough money on you, I may let you go. If you're really good, I might even have someone drive you the 100 miles or so to the border. But for now the circle of life calls." "I won't do it," I said. "I'm not AW. I'm not going to a bunch of guys just so you can get rich off of me. It's really no skin off of my ass," he said. "I have 43 other women in this building who do. Some of them even like it. Some of them even get paid. You did it for Carlo, so it's not like you don't know what to do. It's really up to you." "I was D with Carlo," I said. "I didn't know what was going on. I'm really not AW." "You really are," he smirked. "Whether you were D or not. The first time you did it for money, you became a 1. You're actually better off now, because at least you know what's going on. I have no intention of wasting money DU. All I'm interested in is making a profit off of my investment. If you don't F, you don't eat. When you get hungry enough, you'll beg me to let you some guy for a taco. Either way until I get my money back and then some, you go nowhere." "I'll scream," I said. "And someone will call the police," and he held up his hand for me to be quiet. Then he said something in rapid-fire Spanish. The big man left the room and he started humming. As he hummed, I noticed a smile on his face. A few moments later a man rushed into the room. "Okay, there you go," he said to me. "What?" I asked. "Is this guy going to take me home?" "Nope, this guy is the police chief. You don't even have to scream," he said. "You are not in America anymore. Things don't work the same way here. I'll give you an hour to get your shit together and then I'll start sending guys in. It's your choice. You're probably hungry already. Remember, if you don't eat." And he was right. I don't know how long it took for them to smuggle me out of the country to where I was, but I was starving. The first night, I didn't do it. He'd send guys to my room and I refused them all. A couple of them slapped me and one of them spit on me, but I didn't have it with them. After a few hours he just sent another girl into my room and I had to watch her every guy that came into the room. He was a smart one too. The guys would come into the room and look at me. A lot of them were regulars. They'd never seen me before, so there was the thrill of something new or the new flavor of the month. Once they found out that I wasn't, they'd just do it the other girl. He was using me to get them and then using her to make the money. He was still making money off of me, but I wasn't benefiting from it. By morning I was so hungry I'd have eaten a rat if I could find one. My stomach was growling so loudly that I could barely stand it. He wandered into my room during the day and smiled. "How was your night?" he asked. "I'm hungry, you bastard," I screamed. "What has that to do with me?" he asked casually. "Okay, I'll play your game," I said. "Can I eat now?" "Sorry," he said. "We don't work on credit. First you, then you eat." "Okay, I'll do it. Send somebody in," I said. I couldn't believe how fast my pride and my willpower had failed me. I was begging him to send some stranger in for me to have with. "Sorry again," he said. "It's 9 o'clock on the morning. Our earliest customers won't arrive before about 6. Why don't you take a nap? You're going to need your strength for the evening anyway. I promise to give you a little snack after your first customer and a meal after the 4th one." He laughed and mumbled to himself as he left the room. I tried to sleep.